So our third theme of the day is what we've called transcendence. And just by way of introduction to this theme, if you had an earlier version of the program, you will have seen two names on there who you may see more absent from here as well. We originally had Professor David Ferguson, who's Professor of Theology at Cambridge University from the Church of Scotland, who's going to be here. Sadly, strangely enough, as a result of his role in Scotland as a King's chaplain, he has to attend a funeral on behalf of the King at the moment, so very good reason for not being here. Sadly, he had to drop out last week. We also were hoping to have Dilwar Hussain, who is the chair of New Horizons in British Islam, which is a charity which works on Muslim identity, integrity and reform. Sadly, again, he texted first thing this morning to say he was not well today, was unable to be with us. So it's a great shame we're not able to have Dilwar with us instead. But in their absence, we still have a remarkably good panel, and I'm delighted that we have today Archbishop Angaelos, who is Coptic Orthodox Archbishop of London, who will be well known to many of you. We have Shamara Fletcher-Hoyt, Principal Officer for Pentecostal, Charismatic and Multicultural Relations for Churches Together in England. And if you've seen them together before, that is probably because you saw them at the Queen's funeral. And Shamara read a prayer at the funeral of the Queen a little while ago when that happened. We also have Daniel Greenberg. This morning we were talking about ethics in Parliament, and Daniel is Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. In other words, he's a lawyer responsible for monitoring the operation of the House of Commons Code of Conduct, including breaches of that code, of which there have been one or two in recent times. So Daniel has been kept busy, and it's great to have you with us as well today, Daniel. We also have Malcolm Brown, who is head of Faith and Public Life, Department of the Church of England, who will begin bringing a perspective on our question today as well. So today, this afternoon, we are thinking about the Church of England's role in holding those values that transcend politics, economics, foreign policy, the kind of things that government tends to deal with day by day. The Church of England's role, and we touched upon this throughout the day already, in holding that space of the spiritual, the transcendent, and so on behalf, not just of itself, but of others as well. So other Christian churches and traditions here in the United Kingdom, and so having Shamara and His Eminence Archbishop Angaelos with us as well is a great, will be great to get their perspectives on this question, but also as well. To say we had hoped to have Dilwar with us, but it's great to have Daniel, who represents not just the parliamentary office, but also the Jewish community as well here today, and we'll speak from that perspective too. And so we're looking at how does the Church of England look from the outside? Catherine Pepinster earlier on today referenced a speech which Her Majesty the Queen gave in Lambeth Palace in 2012, where she said this: "We should remind ourselves of the significant position of the Church of England in our nation's life. The concept of our established church is occasionally misunderstood and I believe commonly underappreciated. Its role is not to defend Anglicanism to the exclusion of other religions. Instead, the church has a duty to protect the free practice of all faiths in this country. It certainly provides an identity and a spiritual dimension for its own many adherents, but also gently and assuredly, the Church of England has created an environment for other faith communities, and indeed people of no faith, to live freely. Woven into the fabric of this country, the Church has helped to build a better society, more and more in active cooperation for the common good with those of other faiths." And so in this session, we're trying to bring together voices from largely outside the Church of England, both Christian and from other faiths as well, and from within Parliament, to give their perspective on the Church's role in holding that space of higher values than the mere temporal and the political. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So if I can first of all invite our first speaker, which is His Eminence Archbishop Angaelos, to give his perspective on these questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is such a joy and a blessing to be with you, and very thankful for my dear brother and friend Bishop Graham for the invitation. I may have a problem of a conflict of interest, though, because you want a perspective from outside of the Church of England. And it seems like with my church, as with other Orthodox churches, every time the Church of England does something wrong, people look at me and say, look what your friends are doing now. So I am sometimes seen as being inside just as much as outside. But it's a joy to have that perspective and that ability to be a friend. And I was very thankful that His Grace also invited me a few months ago to speak to some of the new bishops who were going through a course preparing them for ministry and for public life. The first thing I think we need to determine is the strength and the importance of faith, both in our nation but around the world. The narrative at the moment tells us, oh God, it's so wonderful to see you. The narrative is supposed to be telling us that faith doesn't matter anymore, that religion doesn't matter anymore, and then you get numbers being thrown around England that the church is weakening and becoming irrelevant. I don't know about you, but I know that when the now Bishop of Winchester, then Bishop of Truro, published his review on persecution of Christians around the world, it was well known, based on his own assessment, but also on Open Doors and other organizations, that 80% of the world's population considers itself as religious, as having some sort of religious belief. And in this country, although we see institutional ecumenism ebbing and flowing a little bit, sometimes struggling, sometimes being incredibly impactful, we know that relational ecumenism, and case in point, I'm here, speaking with you at your invitation, that is incredibly strong. And that is the space we inhabit, and that is the place we hold. And so the narrative that faith is not important and the church is weak is categorically wrong. And so we, as church, have a responsibility to speak into the public square, to politicians, to policymakers, to civil servants, and present a view that is not going to be organic within that setting. Because within that setting, the organic view is statistical, practical, strategic, financial, political, and sometimes we beat ourselves up for not being good at those things, but I think it's an advantage that we're not very good at those things. Because the set of principles that govern us and govern the church are very different. They are on things that statisticians just don't get. I remember after the census was published, there was a lot of fuss made about numbers. And I'm very thankful to our dear friend, the Archbishop of York, who published a wonderful piece, I think, in the Sunday Times that said, well, since when has Christianity been about being a majority? And if we think back, our Lord Jesus Christ and his 12 disciples, and then their 70 apostles, changed the world. It's never been about being a majority. It's about being impactful. We're going into elections. If our Lord Jesus Christ was running for office and his disciples were his cabinet, he would fail dismally. He would have lost the election. Wasn't very popular. They actually said, crucify him, which we've heard a few times over these last few weeks as well in current settings. But it made a difference. It's not about the 99, it's about the one. And that is one thing that Public Square will not get well. In recent years, we went through the pandemic. And the space of religion and the space of the church and the space of the Church of England was very clear. And that is that we need to stand together. We need to do things together. I remember being on various committees with let me see if I get this right, the Ministry for Housing and Local Government, which has changed its name 3 times since then, I think. And my submission was, you don't need to tell me to look after my people, because it is my job, it is my calling, it is my mission to look after the well-being of my people. You tell me how to do it, and I will do it. And that was echoed through church leaders and religious leaders. Mention was made of Her late Majesty's address at Lambeth Palace in 2012, and I was blessed enough to be there for that. It was her first engagement of her Jubilee year during the time of our dear friend Archbishop Rowan. And it was very relevant that the Queen of England, the head of the Church of England, was saying that. Now, having said that, that comes with responsibility. And this is where having critical friends is very important. The fact that the Church of England has a responsibility and a role to play means that it needs to have a very broad perspective, even broader than the perspective that is within the Church of England itself, on a variety of issues. And to know that when we do something, so in my church, if I take a decision, I know for a fact that that will have implications on others across my church, through ecumenical partners, within religious partners, and in the world. And that's important for us to remember, that we are not functioning in silos anymore. Gone are those days. My personal journey is, I was born in Egypt, moved to Australia when I was 5, grew up there, did my education, went back to Egypt to join the monastery, served for 6 years there as papal secretary, and have been here for almost 30 years. And I guarantee that that is not a rare scenario within our setting here. We move around nations, we move around cities, we move around communities. And so our engagement with one another is important. And as church, we need to speak to people who make decisions and form policies and say to them that we need to look at something greater. Because there is something that moves people beyond policy and beyond strategy. Faith is core to many of us around the world. And that's no surprise, because in the book of Genesis we're told that we are all recipients of the image and likeness of God. So there is something within us that yearns for what is more. There is something within us that looks at greater things, deeper things, more lofty things than what this world gives. And we should never, ever shy away from that. In John 17, our Lord speaks about being in the world but not of the world. But St. Paul speaks about being a Jew to the Jew and a Gentile to the Gentiles. And so we need to live both of those. Where we are there, we are part of the journey, part of the fabric, but each holding on to our particular texture, particular color, and making sure that we play our part in this tapestry. But also, as Christians, constantly being that light and that salt that we are meant to be. With authority, with privilege, with influence, comes immense responsibility. And that's what we're supposed to have in abundance. But again, going back to St. Paul, speaking of not I who live, but Christ who lives in me, we know that we are, as our Lord reminded his disciples, not working in our own field, but in His. And the harvest is His, and the gain is His. But we also need to look at doing good deeds, making good decisions, having good actions, so that people look at us and glorify our Father in heaven. Let's not be too hard on ourselves, though, because the bigger you are, the bigger a target you are. I am very thankful that I am not the Church of England, because I can do a lot of things here that will fly under the radar. People don't care. I could make mistakes that are not going to be as visible as the Archbishop of Canterbury's, or even the Cardinal of Westminster. And so with that visibility, there is responsibility, but also we are assured that if we have responsibility, we have grace. And if we call upon that grace, then we function as we should, because it is He who lives and guides and speaks and shines through us. It's important for us to change the language of discourse. When we speak about social justice, access to resources, child poverty, food scarcity, resource inequality, all of those things are incredibly important. I remember when Bishop Graham was still in Kensington doing things around Grenfell. And the Grenfell Tower represented what the church must do in society in the face of tragedy. And so on and so forth. Just last week I visited a local food bank and heard from the people there that they were working harder and more than ever before. Those are all things that impact people day to day. The beautiful thing about the church is it has a great macro view. We see from above, we see a lot, but also through our pastoral engagement, we have the micro view. We are in communities, living with them. I love what I do. I love being here. I love doing the ecumenical and the official, and it's a gift. But nothing replaces my love for my pastoral duties amongst the people I am called to serve first and foremost. And that is why I can bring their voices when I sit with the great and the good, some of whom are in this room, and try to use a platform that they may not have. And I think that is where our responsibility is. Access is not just for protocol and visibility. It is for representation and for influence. And I think that is where the church has an incredibly important role to play. I remember speaking at General Synod once, and it was at a time of problematic conversation. And I said to my sisters and brothers in the chamber that they should not take things on their own shoulders, because although they were the Church of England, that we are all the Church in England. And so we carry things together. Thank you for gathering today and for listening. Thank you for caring and speaking. Thank you for representing and being a voice. But that is what we are called to do, for we follow in the footsteps of the one who went before us, our chief advocate, who spoke for the whole world and for its salvation, for its goodness, for its victory, as we are called to as well. Thank you.